And now, a next-level moment from AT&T Business. Say you've sent out a gigantic shipment of pillows, and they need to be there in time for International Sleep Day. You've got AT&T 5G, so you're fully confident. But the vendor isn't responding, and International Sleep Day is tomorrow. Luckily, AT&T 5G lets you deal with any issues with ease, so the pillows will get delivered and everyone can sleep soundly, especially you. AT&T 5G requires a compatible plan and device. Coverage not available everywhere. Learn more at att.com/5G network.
You know what's wild? Most people are still overpaying for car insurance just because it's a pain to switch. That's why there's Jerry. Jerry is the only app that compares rates from over 50 insurers in minutes and helps you switch fast with no spam calls or hidden fees. Drivers who save with Jerry could save over $1,300 a year. Before you renew your car insurance policy, do yourself a favor. Download the Jerry app or head to jerry.ai/acast.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to 9 years of Kilowatt. Yes, yesterday, August 5th, was my 9-year anniversary of doing this podcast. I'm actually going to re-release that first episode along with this news episode. So if you want to go and hear how awful I was, you can do so. But this particular episode will be just the news, and then I'll release the first episode ever, episode 1 for Kilowatt, in tandem with this episode. And then on Friday, we should cover Ford's earnings call. Oh, and in addition to this being the 9-year anniversary, or actually yesterday being the 9-year anniversary, this is episode 625. So 9-year anniversary, nice round number for 625. Everything's stacking up for this episode to be slightly better than episode 1. We'll see. You be the judge. You be the judge. Let's get into our EV news. Do you remember Lordstown Motors? You know, the failed EV startup company. They made a truck called the Endurance. Well, they bought a factory from General Motors in Lordstown, Ohio. I still have a little bit of my cold, so you have to deal with my cold and my speech impediment at the same time. Anyway, they bought a factory from GM in Lordstown, Ohio. Lordstown went out of business. Foxconn then bought the factory. If you don't know Foxconn, they generally make, consumer electronics devices like the Nintendo Switch and the Apple iPhone. But it sounded like Foxconn was going to build the Fisker Pear, an electric vehicle for Fisker Motors, at that particular factory. And Foxconn has built electric vehicles in the past. They're not new to this. Well, Fisker went out of business as well. And Foxconn actually sold the factory to a Delaware-based LLC that was formed 2 weeks ago and managed to pony up hundreds of millions of dollars to buy the factory. How many hundreds of millions? $375 million to buy this factory. The LLC in question is called Crescent Dune. What are they going to build there? We have no idea. But Foxconn says that it's an existing business partner, which Foxconn has many business partners, so it could literally be any one of those. And Foxconn is going to still be involved in the manufacturing, whatever that manufacturing looks like at the plant. At the moment, I thought this was interesting, Foxconn is manufacturing electric tractors at the factory, but that will cease, and the new owners will take over at some point. No idea who could possibly be buying this. Like, I would like it to be Apple, so that Apple builds an Apple car. But if I had to make a reckless speculation, I would recklessly speculate that the company they're working with is Afeela, which is the Sony Honda partnership. Now, is it? Probably not. But if I'm looking at companies that are, startups, EV startups that are close to bringing their products to market, Sony and Honda kind of they boil up to the top. I don't know that either one of those two companies has officially said where they would be manufacturing the Afeela car, the unfortunately named Afeela car. But if I had to take, like I said, an irresponsible guess, that's what it would be. But I don't even believe I 1% believe that that's the case. But that's what comes to mind. All right. Rivian is suing the state of Ohio due to the state not allowing Rivian to sell vehicles directly to customers. Now, as pro EV as I am, I do believe that states get to decide if a car company can sell directly to customers or not. I am in favor of that. I don't think they should not allow it, but I understand that, there are dealers, organizations, and you want to keep everything fair. And if a manufacturer is selling directly to consumers, there could be some shady things done that aren't fair. So I understand why they might not want that. And Ohio right now does not allow auto manufacturers to sell directly to consumers unless you're Tesla. And therein lies the problem. If you are any other company, you can't do it, but Tesla can. Now, if you remember way back in the day, Tesla had this fight with a lot of different states, and I think right now they can sell. I think they can sell directly everywhere. For a while, they couldn't sell in Texas, and that's where their headquarters was moved to. But I think that's been solved. Anyway, if you allow one, you got to allow all of them. So, in my opinion. Now, does that mean that Ford, GM, and Stellantis, Honda, and all these other car companies, are they going to sell directly to customers in Ohio? Probably not, because they all have dealers, whereas Rivian, Slate, Tesla, Polestar, they don't have a dealer network to make angry in this situation. So I would imagine that, Ohio is going to have to open this up after the lawsuit. And I wouldn't be surprised if any of these companies that I just mentioned, Lucid, Slate, Rivian, Polestar, they don't add their name to the lawsuit, or at least, some sort of support. I can't remember what it's called when companies aren't actually a part of suing, but they put their full support behind it. There's something. It's almost like a letter writing campaign. But anyway. Turns out this episode isn't going to be better than episode 1. Moving on to our next story. Last month, Lucid set a Guinness record for driving a Lucid Air 749 miles on a single charge. GM, however, General Motors, said, hold my beer. They took a 2026 Silverado EV work truck that has an estimated EPA range of 493 miles, which is impressive, but the GM engineers were certain that they could beat that 749 miles. And they did, and they accomplished this by taking some extreme measures. And by extreme, I mean extremely boring measures. So the course that they did this on were just regular public roads that everybody drives on. They rotated drivers each hour, and they did this over a period of 7 days. So this wasn't like a cannonball run type of event. This was, at your leisure almost. Here's how they did it. They used a WT Silverado, which is the work truck, which is the bare bones version of the Silverado. But it does have a 205 kilowatt hour battery, but it also weighs 8,500 pounds. In order for them to, surpass Lucid's 700 and whatever miles, they had to drive between 20 and 25 miles per hour whenever possible. So they didn't go faster than 25 if they can get away with it. The faster you drive, the more energy you consume. So if you're unfamiliar, an internal combustion engine gets better mileage on the highway, whereas EVs get better mileage on the surface streets and worse mileage on the highway. The engineers also took advantage of downhill, being able to go downhill to get some of that mileage. They didn't use climate controls at all. They got rid of the spare tire. And they also made some modifications. Now, at this point, you might say, what kind of modifications? That's cheating. Well, they made some modification to reduce rolling resistance and drag. Now, when I read this, I was like, well, that's definitely cheating. But it's not. They used the tonneau cover that reduced the drag, and they didn't use the new tires because new tires are too sticky and that increases rolling resistance. So they put on some used tires to reduce rolling resistance. Anyway, the engineers were able to get a total of 1,059 miles out of that Silverado work truck, which is amazing. Nobody's gonna drive around at 20 to 25 miles an hour and think that that's a good idea for the rest of their life to get a good range, right? But it is a good example of if you're in a situation where you're like, man, I don't know if I can make it to the next charger safely. If you can safely do so, slow down to 40, 45 miles an hour. That way you're going to consume less energy when you're trying to get the most out of your battery pack so that you can get to that next charger. The other thing is GM didn't, post this to the Guinness Book of World Records. So this is all very unofficial. Lucid still holds the official Guinness Book World Record. But I wouldn't be surprised if they did it again and took that coveted award away from Lucid.
Hi, this is Joe from Vanta. In today's digital world, compliance regulations are changing constantly, and earning customer trust has never mattered more. Vanta helps companies get compliant fast and stay secure with the most advanced AI, automation, and continuous monitoring out there. So whether you're a startup going for your first SOC 2 or ISO 27001, or a growing enterprise managing vendor risk, Vanta makes it quick, easy, and scalable. And I'm not just saying that because I work here. Get started at vanta.com.
Tired of your car insurance rate going up even with a clean driving record? You're not alone. That's why there's Jerry, your proactive insurance assistant. Jerry compares rates side by side from over 50 top insurers and helps you switch with ease. Jerry even tracks market rates and alerts you when it's best to shop. No spam calls, no hidden fees. Drivers who save with Jerry could save over $1,300 a year. Switch with confidence, download the Jerry app, or visit jerry.ai/ACAST today.
Before we move on to our Tesla stories this week, I would like to encourage you, if you have the time and the money, to go to supportkilowatt.com and you can, support the show for as little as $1. It's getting closer to January, and guess what happens in January? That's CES. It's very expensive to stay in a hotel in Vegas during CES. It's not cheap. The meals, breakfast is $30 if you're lucky. It's just super expensive. So part of the reason why we have a Patreon is the Patreon supports the show, right? And I'm able to take the money that we get from Patreon and do things like go to CES. So if you want to support the show, go to supportkilowatt.com, sign up, and for as little as $1, you can help this show go to Vegas this year. And this year, I'm hoping to talk again with the Scout Motors folks. There's a whole bunch of autonomous companies I didn't get to last year. So I'm really hoping to be able to catch up with them, as well as, I don't know if this is going to happen or not, but I'm hoping that Slate Motors shows up because I'd really like to see that pickup truck in person. So anyway, supportkilowatt.com if you want to support the show. Let's move on to our Tesla news. Now, the Tesla news, mostly sad this week. I actually had more Tesla news and I took it out because it really felt like I was beating Tesla up. We'll talk about that more on a different show. So the first story, Tesla and LG Energy Solutions, they've signed a deal for $4.3 million to build battery cells for Powerwalls and Megapacks. These cells will be built at LG's plant in Michigan. And this is going to help Tesla reduce its dependence on China, and then it'll also kind of help with tariffs and all that other stuff. And, as a selfish American, I'm always glad when we can bring more jobs here to the U.S. That's not the bad news. I actually put that in there specifically for good news, because here's the bad news, and it's not funny. In 2019, a fatal crash involving Tesla's autopilot occurred in Florida. What had happened was the driver took his eyes off the road to reach for his phone. It had fallen. He went to grab it, and autopilot is on, and he thought that autopilot basically would have his back. Well, the problem is the car went through a T intersection that had a stop sign with actually, blinking red lights. The car completely blew past that stop sign and hit a Chevy Tahoe. Standing next to the Chevy Tahoe was a 22-year-old woman and a man, her boyfriend, who was seriously injured. And unfortunately, the woman died in the accident. Very, very sad. This is something that absolutely did not need to happen. And now there's one less person in the world, and their family is grieving. And I include, her boyfriend in that group, and her family and friends. So the families of the victims sued Tesla. They also sued the driver, but they settled out of court with the driver. But they sued Tesla in federal court. And basically, the plaintiffs claimed that Tesla was to blame because it operated its technology, autopilot, on a road that it was not designed for. Now, I know early on that Tesla said that autopilot or auto steer, whatever they were calling it back in the day, was primarily for highways. I don't know, and I couldn't really find this information reliably, if autopilot was not ever recommended by Tesla or not allowed on surface streets. Obviously, Tesla did a lot of crazy things back in the day, especially early on with autopilot. Like people would be driving down the freeway and there'd be nobody in the front seat and somebody sitting in the back seat, and only autopilot was enabled. But I don't know if Tesla ever specifically said you can't use autopilot on surface streets. And by the way, it is worth noting that Tesla does state in the manual that the driver needs to pay attention, keep their hands on the wheel, be ready to take over at any time, and be fully attentive. Now, Tesla was found to be partially guilty, not completely guilty, in this case, and they were ordered to pay $324 million in damages. Now, the way it broke down was $200 million in punitive damages, $35 million went to the deceased mother, $24 million went to the deceased father, and $70 million went to the boyfriend, who was seriously injured but did not pass away. Now, when I add all of this up, it does not equal $324 million. It equals $329 million. So I'm not sure where the discrepancy is on this. From my very limited understanding of the law, punitive damages are there to punish the defendant, to deter, future bad behavior. So as far as who gets that $200 million, I would imagine that it is split up between the three defendants and the lawyers, and there's probably some fair way to determine who gets what. So in addition to the sums of money that I just, talked about, that $200 million will be split up between those people. Tesla is going to appeal the jury's decision. One of the things that I found to be most interesting about this, and I've actually been holding on to this particular piece that I'm about to talk about since the middle of July, but I didn't talk about it because I wanted to see how the trial ended up one way or the other. And what I found interesting was that there was a Tesla engineer that stated that Tesla didn't maintain autopilot crash records prior to 2018. Now, this happened in 2019, so they had already, started creating a database. But autopilot was launched in 2015. And the first major autopilot crash that I can remember was in 2016. There are still a number of people who have been with this podcast since episode 1. So a lot of you are going to recognize this name. But Joshua Brown in 2016 was driving his Model S down a highway in Florida, and a tractor trailer was crossing the highway, and the car's sensors failed to detect the semi-trailer. Like there was a bright blue sky behind the semi-trailer and the reflection from the trailer and the way that the sun was positioned. That's what they kind of thought the reason was why the sensors failed. But anyway, Joshua's vehicle hit the trailer, went through the trailer, and then actually traveled for quite a distance and then hit a pole. And unfortunately, Joshua passed away. And he was a big enthusiast of Tesla's products and autopilot. He had a YouTube channel that he chronicled like his experiences with the car, and he sadly passed away. The accident was a big deal in and outside of the EV community, as small as it was back in the day. If they didn't keep data on autopilot crashes prior to Joshua's accident, and there was actually another accident before that, I think it was in China. If they didn't, keep data on autopilot crashes before that, I would have almost certainly thought that would have been the catalyst for them to start keeping data or keeping records. Man, my speech impediment is really strong tonight. Sorry about the stuttering. Anyway, the point is Tesla had autopilot out for 3 years and they were not tracking crash data, which seems nutty to me. Now, back in the day, a long time ago, probably in 2001 or 2002, I worked for a small software company, and I wasn't a programmer or anything, but one of the things that this software company did is they built like parts inventory software for companies like GM and Ford and stuff like that. Those were actual clients of the software company. And one day I was sitting down and I was talking with one of the owners of the company, and there was a person there. I don't remember who he worked for, but they knew I was a firefighter. I was only working there part-time. I was working full-time at the fire department. And we were talking about car accidents, and I can't remember who brought it up, but they're basically telling me that, there's an acceptable amount of injuries and deaths before any company is going to issue a recall. And it's not that, these companies like GM and Ford and Stellantis and Tesla want people to die. There's just there's a threshold before they issue a recall. And I don't know how true that is. Again, this was 24 years ago, and I was 25 or 26 years old at the time. But I always found that to be really interesting. And if Tesla was not officially keeping track of this data, how are they determining it's an issue? What's the threshold when they are like, hey, we need to relook at what we're doing here? Did they not keep this data just because they were a young company and they just didn't think about it? Or were they, okay, I'm going to go a different route here. I don't want to potentially get sued. Was there just some other reason? I'm curious about that. Anyway, if you want to know more about autopilot crashes, there's actually a really good Wikipedia page. I'm going to put a link in the show notes that chronicle the fatal autopilot crashes, and Joshua's is in there. And it has little GIFs that show how the accidents occurred. So it's really informative. Again, links in the show notes. All right, everybody, that is kind of it for me this week. Like I said, you are going to get episode 1 in a separate episode. That'll be episode 326. Padding the numbers is what I'm doing here. It's the episode's 35 minutes long. I listened to it. It's actually not as was positive it was going to be awful. It wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. It's still pretty bad, but it's not as bad as I thought it would be. But there is some interesting information that I had forgot about Elon's Part 2 master plan. So I hope you enjoy it. But if you don't want to listen to it, by all means, delete it, because I understand why. All right. If you want to email me, it's Bodie, BODIE at 918digital.com. You can find me on Twitter at 918digital. You can also find me on LinkedIn, Bodie Grimm. I'm there as well. And I hope everybody had a great weekend, and I hope you're having a great week, and I will talk to you on Friday.
From prying eyes to improving defenses to peace of mind. Take your company's cybersecurity to the next level. Transform the everyday with Siemens.
Hi, this is Joe from Vanta. In today's digital world, compliance regulations are changing constantly, and earning customer trust has never mattered more. Vanta helps companies get compliant fast and stay secure with the most advanced AI, automation, and continuous monitoring out there. So whether you're a startup going for your first SOC 2 or ISO 27001, or a growing enterprise managing vendor risk, Vanta makes it quick, easy, and scalable. And I'm not just saying that because I work here. Get started at Vanta.com.
Acast powers the world's best podcasts. Here's a show that we recommend.
Hi, I'm Debbie Millman, and I host a podcast called Design Matters from the TED Audio Collective. Every episode, I have conversations with designers, writers, artists, and other luminaries of contemporary thought. People like Roman Mars, Ai Weiwei, Ethan Hawke, and Ashley Ford. We not only talk about their crafts, but how they design the arc of their lives, what they've learned, what obstacles they've overcome and how they've done it, and how they see the world. Join us for an inquiry into the broader world of creative culture. Find and follow Design Matters with Debbie Millman wherever you're listening to this.
Acast helps creators launch, grow, and monetize their podcasts everywhere. Acast.com.